Welcome back to another episode of What Works Wednesday. Today, I've got a really exciting topic that people love to talk about: death. Just kidding. And not just kidding that we're going to talk about death. We are. But people don't like to talk about it. It's a really painful topic. Even when I'm meeting with clients and we're kind of going through building their financial plan, it's a really important topic to talk about because we know it's going to happen eventually. As sad as that is, as much as we don't like to deal with our own mortality, it's important. And it's important to make sure that our loved ones are set up for success, that our spouse, our kids, our friends, our community are not negatively impacted if something were to happen to us. But even when I'm working with clients, you see them kind of retract back. You see them brush things off. And so it's a really hard conversation, but it's really, really important. And it's a big topic. It's a huge topic with lots of areas to talk about. Life insurance, retirement income, estate planning. It just is big and it's overwhelming. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm just going to click the next episode because today is not the day I'm going to talk about death, that's okay. But I do encourage you to come back at some point and listen to this full episode because we're going to talk about a really high level basic touch point, which is what are the 4 ways that money passes should you die? And this is kind of the foundation to estate planning, which estate planning basically says if something were to happen to you, what's the game plan? Where do things go? Who takes care of the kids? Who can make decisions? And to understand what the 4 big options are can allow you to take control of that situation and make a plan for yourself and your family that is the best for yourself. Do not be someone who passes without a plan in place and leaves your family in a world of hurt. It's not a good move. It's not being a good steward of the relationships and the people in your life. So make a plan and understand if A, then B on how these things work. So let's dive in. Let's talk about the 4 ways money passes. When we pass away, our stuff has to go somewhere. Our stuff did not disappear and it doesn't turn to dust. So we can't have bank accounts and cars and homes just rotting on the side of the road that are owned by someone who passed away 10 years ago where it never transferred ownership. So there is a responsibility to actually transfer ownership of these things one way or another. So if there's not a plan in place, the responsibility for that falls on the local jurisdiction, the state, the city, where their job is then to say, okay, this person passed away. They didn't have anything in place. We now have to figure out where this stuff goes. This is the first way money passes. It's called intestacy. If something passes intestate, that means the state or local jurisdiction is in charge of making those decisions for you. You'd be shocked at how common this is and how detrimental it is, because we just automatically assume it's going to go in order to my spouse and my kids and everything's going to be fine, so who cares? But that's not always the case. First of all, the state can then take a big fee because they're like, hey, this is all of your stuff, all your bank accounts, your life insurance, your house, your cars. Well, we're taking on this responsibility. We need to get paid for this. And so they can take some significant fees from your estate through probate at court, through executor fees, things like that, where then your family doesn't get as much. Secondly, you may have designated wishes that they don't follow through on because they don't care and they don't know because you never wrote it down. So in the state of Virginia, specifically, if something moves intestate, on average, the state will take their chunk. What's remaining, 1/3 will go to the spouse and 2/3 will go into a trust for the kids. Well, that might be fine because the spouse will be set up as the custodian of the kids. But when the kids turn 18, that means that's their money. They take it. And your spouse is left with just a little bit that is not theirs. It didn't move all to the spouse and then the spouse passed away all to the kids. That's just a local jurisdiction thing here. But you may not want that. Or you may be estranged from a family member. Ideally not. No one wants that, but that may be the case. Or you may have a special needs child who has more specific needs where you would say, hey, I actually want to give more to that child, or I want to put certain protections for that child. You may have a child who you're not estranged from, but who has, substance abuse or mental health issues, where you would say, I would rather give them this money differently, not just in a lump sum. So when things pass and test it, typically your family gets the least amount of whatever the assets of the estate are, and you have the least amount of control. And if you're a surviving spouse or a surviving child, it can be really, really painful. So we don't want option one. Option two is legal passing, whether things are owned jointly or you have a beneficiary or something called a pass or transfer on death notice on accounts. We can set this up on your retirement account. Who's the beneficiary? You have a legal document that says if I die, this specific account passes to this specific person. I own my house jointly with my wife. So if I pass away, she's still the owner. It doesn't have to pass. She just is now the only owner because the one owner, me, passed away. So legal ownership, titling, beneficiaries, things like that are the second way money passes, and it's the trump card. So if you have a will that says everything goes to my spouse, but you never changed your beneficiary from before you were married, and it says on your retirement account that your brother gets the account, well, trump card is your brother. The will won't matter in that situation because it's going to follow the legal titling, the legal beneficiary, the pass or transfer on death notice. So these are really important. A big piece of estate planning is looking and making sure that these align with your will or your trust, to say, hey, if your will is your wishes, let's make sure all of these other legal things, how your house is owned, what beneficiaries are listed, reflect that so that everything kind of moves in tandem. Third is a will. This is what most people are familiar with. And a will is going to be just a paper document that says, hey, state, when you're deciding who transfers, this is who I would like it to go to. You appoint someone called an executor, who is the person to carry out the will, who takes it down to the courthouse because it's still the state and court's prerogative at that point in time. It's still their responsibility. But your executor goes down and says, actually, they already made a list of wishes and people and ways they want this to pass. They also listed me as the executor. I will take responsibility to make sure all of this gets done. And then the state says, great. And they will then oversee your executor. So they can still take probate court fees, and they will, because it's still going through the courts. It's still public record. But your executor carries out your wishes with it. So it's a great basic option. It doesn't tend to lend itself to certain, like, how you want things to pass. I want this child to get a lump sum. I want this child to get a paycheck every month. You can't get as creative with it, but it is a great option for things passing. And last, the fourth way money passes is through trusts. And I will say trusts are their own world. I could do 10 episodes on trusts, and there's a lot of misconceptions. People think I only need a trust if I've got millions and millions of dollars because it's a rich person's thing. And that's simply not true. The base level idea of a trust is this is a way that you can say all my stuff is owned by the trust. Leland Gross doesn't own anything anymore. The house is owned by the trust. The cars are owned by the trust. My bank accounts are owned by the trust. And when I die, nothing is passed because the trust is still existing. The trust serves my benefit. I'm the trustee, which is like the executor, the person who manages the trust, and I'm the benefactor of the trust. So it just acts like it's mine. But when I pass, there's a new trustee who's in charge of managing the trust and a new beneficiary. And there's a rule book for them that I've created that says, I want it to be for my wife and kids, and this is how I want it to run. I want my kids to get what they need from 18 to 25, but I don't need to give them the whole life insurance policy up front in a lump sum. They can get that at 30 or whenever they get married or whatever stipulations you want, you can put in there. Real benefits to a trust are it completely avoids the courts. It avoids probate. So you don't have to pay as many fees. It's much more low cost on the back end, significantly. And it's also private. So some people don't want public record to see where I gave all my stuff to. So trusts are a privatized way to do that. Trusts get really deep. We don't have time for all of that, but they're great for special needs children, to protect them, to protect vulnerable citizens. Trusts are wonderful, wonderful tools for that. They're great for managing high net worth. That is true, but also managing things like low net worth, Medicaid. If you need Medicaid, but you don't want to spend all your money, which they require you to do, a trust can be a great alternative for that. So trusts are really powerful, really complex, and a great, great option that everyone should consider at some point. So that's the 4 ways money passes. If you don't do anything, the state decides. If you title things a certain way, they'll avoid the courts and they'll just trump card everything. That is how it'll pass. If you do a will, the courts are still overseeing, but it follows your wishes. And then a trust is I have full control after death too. I can make sure things go how I want them to, and it provides a lot of protections in this life for people who need Medicaid, who have really high net worths, who have special needs kids. Lots of scenarios are really beneficial with trusts. So, like I said at the beginning of this is not a fun topic. People do not like thinking about death. I don't. I'm not over here loving daydreaming about after I die, but I care about my family. I care about, setting them up for success, protecting them. And it's really, really important that everybody in their financial journey sets up a plan in place, whether it's a will, whether it's your beneficiaries, whether it's a trust. Make sure you do the due diligence to set that stuff up. And then review it every few years. You don't need to review it and change it all the time, but just making sure as time has gone on, what's changed? Do I need to update this? Because when you pass away, there's already going to be a impossible crater-sized hole left where you were. Your family's going to be missing you and mourning and grieving. And what we don't want to do is then add on intense financial stress on top of that. So do the due diligence. Go forth, create a plan, build the life you want for yourself now and your family later, and prosper.